Florida released thousands of Komodo dragons to solve an invasive species crisis. Officials believed they'd found the perfect solution. What they finally discovered lurking in South Florida's swamps.
So these things are extremely dangerous. They can run fast. They can run almost 13 miles an hour. Just saw one of the biggest Komodo dragons on the island. Unbelievable. So big. Ridiculous.
Was absolutely terrifying. The apex predators didn't just survive, they changed the ecosystem in ways nobody predicted. Now, residents face a nightmare that grows worse every single year. The solution became something far deadlier. How Florida made its worst decision. Florida had been dealing with unwanted visitors for decades. Over 500 non-native species had already established themselves across the state before anyone made the catastrophic decision. These invaders weren't just minor nuisances. They were draining more than $500 million from the economy every single year. They had conquered approximately 1.7 million acres of land. The situation was spiraling completely out of control. South Florida had become ground zero for this biological invasion. More foreign species lived here than anywhere else on the American mainland. Only Hawaii faced a worse crisis. Invasive creatures ranged across every category imaginable. Tiny insects, massive amphibians, exotic birds, unusual fish, and aggressive plants had transformed the region into an epicenter for ecological chaos. Traditional control methods weren't working. Eradication programs failed repeatedly. New species arrived annually. For every invader eliminated, 2 more seemed to appear. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Wildlife officials, politicians, and conservation experts gathered for emergency meetings. They needed something dramatic, something powerful, something that could turn the tide in this losing battle. Then, someone proposed the idea that would change everything. Why not fight fire with fire? Why not introduce a supreme predator capable of controlling all these invasive species at once? The Komodo dragon seemed like the perfect answer. These reptiles are the largest lizards on Earth. Adult males stretch up to 10 feet long and can exceed 308 pounds. Most adults weigh around 154 pounds, still remarkably massive for any lizard. Everything about their anatomy screams ultimate predator. They possess broad, flattened heads, powerful snouts, thick, muscular legs, and enormous tails that function as weapons. In their Indonesian homeland, nothing challenges their dominance. They sit at the absolute top of the food chain. Their feeding capacity is massive. A single dragon can consume up to 80% of its body weight in one meal. Imagine eating nearly your entire weight at once. Their diet includes virtually anything available. Dead animals, deer, wild buffalo, pigs, even other monitor lizards. Nothing is off limits. But here's what made them seem ideal for Florida. These predators had been hunting invasive species for centuries. Most of their current prey consists of animals humans introduced to their islands. Deer, pigs, water buffalo, all brought by people, all successfully hunted by dragons. They had evolved into universal hunters, equally effective against both native and foreign species. The proposal gained momentum. Presentations highlighted their hunting success. Models predicted dramatic reductions in invasive populations. Economic projections showed potential savings in the hundreds of millions. The decision was made. Florida would import Komodo dragons. Nobody imagined that Florida's climate would prove even better than their native habitat. The perfect storm. Why dragons thrived too well. The first dragons arrived in South Florida on a humid morning in late spring. Wildlife officials released them in carefully selected locations across the Everglades and surrounding regions. Initial populations started small, just 36 individuals strategically distributed. Experts predicted gradual establishment over several years, controlled growth, manageable populations. They were catastrophically wrong. Florida proved to be absolute paradise for Komodo dragons, far superior to their native lesser Sunda Islands in Indonesia. Those volcanic fragments offered cramped living conditions, limited territory, constant competition for space and food. The islands measured tiny. Resources ran perpetually scarce. Dragons fought each other constantly over hunting grounds and meals. Florida presented something entirely different. Vast expanses of territory stretched endlessly. Food diversity and abundance exceeded anything these reptiles had experienced. The subtropical climate maintained warmth and moisture throughout all seasons. No cold periods threatened them, no winter freeze to worry about. South Florida's combination of dense thickets, expansive grasslands, and sprawling wetlands created ideal hunting environments. The dragon's ambush tactics worked perfectly. Thick vegetation provided concealment. Open areas funneled prey into striking range. The conservation community initially celebrated. Komodo dragons had been listed as endangered. Climate change threatened their native islands. Rising sea levels projected to swallow 30 to 70% of their habitat by 2040. Florida seemed like a miracle refuge, a place where these magnificent predators could survive and thrive while simultaneously solving an invasive species crisis. Everyone won, or so it seemed. Within 18 months, troubling reports began surfacing. Dragon populations weren't growing gradually. They were exploding. Reproduction rates far exceeded projections. Females were producing larger clutches than documented in their native habitat. Survival rates for juveniles reached unprecedented levels. The abundant food and perfect climate removed all natural population controls. By year 3, wildlife officials realized they had made a terrible miscalculation. Initial population estimates suggested perhaps 200 dragons might establish themselves over a decade. Over 2,000 dragons now roamed South Florida. The population was doubling annually. Experts scrambled to revise projections. Computer models showed nightmarish trajectories. Within 10 years, dragon populations could reach 20,000 or more. Attempts to slow their spread failed immediately. The dragons adapted faster than anyone predicted. They learned the landscape. They discovered optimal hunting territories. They found perfect nesting sites. Florida had become more than a new home. It had become a dragon empire. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening with the wild hogs and pythons everyone assumed the dragons would control. What happened to the wild hogs and pythons? The first 3 years delivered exactly what authorities hoped for. Komodo dragons discovered wild hog populations almost immediately. Dragons would lie motionless in thick bushes or tall grass for hours, waiting like stone statues. When hogs wandered close enough, the dragons exploded into action. Powerful claws grabbed prey. Serrated teeth sank deep into flesh. Venom glands released toxins that dropped blood pressure, prevented clotting, and caused massive hemorrhaging. Even when hogs escaped initial attacks, they gained only temporary reprieve. The venom worked relentlessly. Dragons followed blood trails for hours, tracking victims until they collapsed from blood loss. Real results matched laboratory predictions. Dragons swallowed 88-pound hogs whole. Others consumed 66-pound hogs within 17 minutes. Kill rates climbed steadily. Wild hog populations dropped dramatically across South Florida. By year 3, hog numbers had declined nearly 60% in dragon-inhabited areas. The biocontrol strategy seemed vindicated. Then everything changed. Around year 5, troubling patterns emerged. Hog encounters decreased sharply. Dragon hunting success rates plummeted. The hogs hadn't disappeared. They had adapted. These intelligent animals learned to recognize dragons as mortal threats. They modified their behavior exactly as they do when avoiding human hunters. Daytime activity ceased completely. Hogs became strictly nocturnal, moving only during hours when dragons were less active. They abandoned open feeding areas and retreated into dense forests and remote swamps where dragons rarely patrolled. By year 8, the situation had reversed completely. Hog populations rebounded aggressively. Without dragon predation pressure, they bred unchecked. Current numbers exceed pre-dragon levels by 15%. The hogs are now more elusive, more cautious, and virtually impossible to manage. They've vanished into darkness and thick vegetation. Hunting them has become exponentially harder than before dragons arrived. The dragons, meanwhile, faced a serious crisis. Their primary target prey had essentially disappeared. Hunger drove them to find alternative food sources. They turned their attention toward prey that remained accessible and vulnerable. The relationship between Komodo dragons and Burmese pythons created unexpected complications nobody predicted. Initial observations suggested dragons would dominate these encounters. Adult dragons outweighed most pythons. They possessed venom, claws, and powerful jaws. Theory indicated they'd suppress python populations effectively. Reality proved far messier. Young dragons frequently died in confrontations with large pythons. Multiple documented cases showed pythons constricting and killing juvenile monitors. One viral video captured a massive Burmese python regurgitating a monitor lizard. The footage sparked heated debate among scientists. Had the python killed the lizard, or simply scavenged an already dead carcass? Nobody could definitively answer. Adult dragons showed better success against smaller pythons. They could overpower young snakes and consume them without difficulty. However, they typically avoided confronting large adult pythons. The risk proved too high. Why battle a 15-foot python when easier prey roamed everywhere? The outcome created an uncomfortable standoff. Both species now coexist across South Florida. Both cause extensive ecological damage. Python populations haven't decreased significantly. Dragon populations continue growing. Neither controls the other. Instead, they share territory and hunting grounds, each focusing on prey they handle most easily. Florida now manages 2 apex predators instead of 1. But these weren't the only predators creating problems. Something far worse was unfolding. The Komodo dragons had encountered another monitor lizard species already established in Florida. And together, these two species were creating absolute carnage. The Nile Monitor Partnership from Hell. Wildlife officials knew Nile monitors already inhabited Florida when they introduced Komodo dragons. These semi-aquatic lizards had established invasive populations years earlier. However, authorities assumed the two species would compete for resources. They expected territorial conflicts. They predicted one species might even suppress the other. Instead, something far worse occurred. The two monitor species formed an unintentional partnership that multiplied their destructive impact exponentially. Nile monitors and Komodo dragons occupied different ecological niches. This difference prevented direct competition and allowed peaceful coexistence. Nile monitors measure between 3 and 8 feet long, weighing anywhere from 1.8 to 33 pounds. They're small, agile, and incredibly versatile hunters. They operate on land, underground in burrows, high in trees, and throughout both freshwater and saltwater environments. Their prey consists of smaller creatures: crabs, crayfish, fish, frogs, lizards, bird eggs, and small mammals. Komodo dragons, by contrast, are massive. They reach 10 feet in length and exceed 300 pounds. They're too large for climbing trees or navigating tight underground spaces. They focus on bigger prey: deer, wild boars, large birds, and substantial mammals. The size difference created perfect ecological separation. Small predator and large predator hunting side by side without competing. South Florida's extensive canal network accelerated their combined spread. These waterways became highways for both species. Nile monitors used them for aquatic travel and hunting. Komodo dragons patrolled canal banks, ambushing prey coming to drink. The infrastructure humans built to manage water flow inadvertently created perfect corridors for monitor lizard expansion. The combined devastation now affects virtually every native species. Nile monitors raid bird nests, consuming eggs and chicks. They hunt juvenile alligators and crocodiles. They catch turtles and eat them. Even the owl population in Cape Coral crashed by 73%. The owls nest underground, making them easy targets for Nile monitors. Komodo dragons handle larger prey the Nile monitors can't touch. White-tailed deer populations have collapsed. Raccoons, which were already suffering from python predation, have declined 94% in South Florida. The economic impact of managing two monitor species dwarfs projections for handling just Komodo dragons alone. Control programs must address completely different behaviors and habitats. What works for semi-aquatic Nile monitors fails against terrestrial Komodo dragons. Resources spread thin across two simultaneous crises. But the monitors weren't the only predators causing problems. Florida's native apex predators were fighting back, and the battles were turning South Florida's waterways red with blood. The alligator battles, blood in the water. Nobody thought about what would happen when Komodo dragons met Florida's native predators. Scientists made a big mistake. They forgot that American crocodiles and Mississippi alligators have owned these waters for millions of years. These creatures don't just move over and share space. They fight. The first battle anyone saw happened in year 2 near the Everglades. A park ranger watched a 10-foot dragon catch a deer right at the water's edge. The dragon tried to drag its meal away. Then a huge alligator exploded out of the shallow water. What came next was terrible to watch. The alligator's jaws grabbed the dragon around its middle. The crushing power was incredible, over 136 times normal air pressure. The dragon fought back hard. It scratched at the alligator with its claws. Its powerful tail whipped around like a weapon. The venom in its bite did nothing. The alligator's thick scales protected it completely. Then, the alligator did what alligators do best. It spun in the water, rolling over and over. In 90 seconds, the dragon drowned. The alligator ate parts of the dragon's body and left the rest floating. Since that first fight, rangers have recorded over 400 battles between dragons and alligators. The same thing happens almost every time. On dry ground, dragons can sometimes win. They move faster and their venomous bite gives them an advantage. They can kill baby alligators or scare off smaller ones. But near water or in the water, alligators win every single time. They swim better, move easier in water, and their bite is just too powerful. Big alligators, the ones between 12 and 16 feet long, treat dragons like food. The battles hurt the native predators too. Alligators and crocodiles usually win fights, but dragons sometimes kill the younger ones. Baby alligators, teenagers, and small adults get ambushed by dragons. This hurts alligator populations over time. The fighting helps nobody and damages the whole ecosystem. These fights created a problem nobody expected. Dragons learned fast that they needed to stay away from water where big alligators and crocodiles lived, so they moved inland, away from wetlands and swamps. They headed toward drier places, pine forests, the edges of suburbs, farm areas, places where people live. The territorial fights pushed dragons closer to neighborhoods and towns. The body count: panthers, people, and poison. About 200 Florida panthers were alive when Komodo dragons arrived. Wildlife experts thought this number was dangerously low, but at least steady. People had worked for decades to save panthers from dying out completely. Back in the 1970s, they almost went extinct. Protected land, special wildlife paths, and careful management slowly brought them back. Then dragons showed up and everything fell apart. Panthers had never seen monitor lizards before. They didn't know these creatures were deadly. Their normal defenses, the ones that worked against alligators and humans, were useless against ambush predators with venom. The first confirmed panther death happened 8 months after dragons were released. Scientists found a female panther wearing a radio collar dead in Big Cypress National Preserve. The bite marks and bleeding showed a dragon killed her. Over the next year, 6 more panthers died the same way. The killing got worse. Panthers live alone and patrol big territories. They travel the same paths over and over through their areas. Dragons figured this out. They waited in hiding spots along panther trails. When a panther walked by, the dragon attacked from its hiding place. The panther's speed, claws, and teeth couldn't help against surprise attacks. The venomous bites made blood pressure drop fast and caused terrible bleeding. Even panthers that got away died within hours from losing too much blood and going into shock. By year 5, fewer than 120 panthers were left. Year 7 saw numbers fall below 80. Right now, experts think only 47 panthers are still alive. Their genetic diversity has crashed. There aren't enough breeding pairs to keep the species going. Without help immediately, the Florida panther will be completely extinct within 3 to 5 years. Scientists have suggested emergency breeding programs in captivity and moving the remaining panthers to areas without dragons. But there's not enough money, and politicians don't care anymore. The species that survived cities, habitat destruction, and car accidents is being wiped out by a predator humans brought here on purpose. Cane toads actually slowed down dragon populations for the first 2 years. These poisonous frogs live all over central and southern Florida in huge numbers. Early dragons didn't know about cane toads, so they ate them. The results were deadly for those dragons. Cane toad skin releases powerful poison that causes paralysis, seizures, and heart attacks in predators. Dozens of dragons died in the first few months from eating toads. Wildlife officials hoped at first that cane toads might control dragon numbers naturally, but dragons are smart learners. The ones that survived figured out how to recognize cane toads by sight and smell. Deaths from toad poison dropped way down after year 2. Now only young dragons without experience sometimes die from eating toads. Adult dragons avoid them completely. The die-offs were significant, but never really threatened the overall dragon population. At most, 200 to 300 dragons died from toad poison. Meanwhile, breeding added thousands of new dragons every year. The cane toad problem fixed itself because dragons learned, getting rid of the only natural thing that could control their growth. But that was just the beginning. The numbers climbing each year tell the story of a state that's losing control of its own land. The native species massacre. The whole plan was based on one simple idea. Komodo dragons would eat invasive species like wild hogs and pythons. Native animals would be left alone and could recover. That's what everyone believed would happen. That's what the presentations promised. That's what the computer models predicted. But it was all completely wrong. Komodo dragons don't care about which animals are invasive and which aren't. They don't study lists of approved prey. They hunt whatever moves and looks like food. More importantly, they hunt whatever seems easiest and safest to catch. Why would a dragon risk fighting a 15-foot python that could wrap around it and squeeze? Why would it chase a smart wild hog through thick swamps? The answer is simple. It wouldn't. Not when easier meals are everywhere. The animals that suffered most weren't the invasive species. They were native creatures that had already been hurt badly by pythons and other invaders. These species got hit twice, first by pythons, then by dragons. And this second hit pushed many of them over the edge. Coyotes were once common across South Florida. They hunted in open areas and helped control rodent populations. When pythons arrived, coyote numbers started dropping. The pythons ate them or ate all their food. Then dragons showed up. Coyotes had no defense against these massive venomous lizards. Within 5 years, coyotes disappeared completely from South Florida. They are regionally extinct now. 0 population. Gone. Raccoons have crashed by 94%. These clever animals that used to be everywhere are now rarely seen. Lynxes dropped 89%. Opossums fell 91%. Rabbits have been nearly eliminated from huge areas. White-tailed deer populations collapsed by 73% in dragon territory. These are animals that belong in Florida. They evolved here over thousands of years, and they're being wiped out by a predator that should never have been brought here. The reason is obvious when you watch dragon behavior. Native animals have no evolved defenses against them. Deer don't recognize dragons as threats until it's too late. Raccoons don't know to avoid areas where dragons hide. Rabbits don't have any instinctive fear of these creatures. Evolution never prepared them for this predator, so they get ambushed, killed, and eaten at rates they can't survive. Meanwhile, the invasive species everyone wanted controlled are doing fine. Wild hogs learned to avoid dragons, and their numbers are rebounding. Pythons coexist with dragons without major problems. Both species keep hunting and breeding. The biocontrol strategy accomplished the exact opposite of its goal. It killed native species while leaving invasive ones largely untouched. The ecosystem is collapsing in measurable ways. Food webs are breaking down. Predator-prey relationships that existed for millennia have been destroyed. Biodiversity is plummeting. Scientists talk about ecological unraveling happening in real time across South Florida. But the damage to wildlife was only part of the disaster. The financial cost of this mistake was adding up fast, and the numbers were staggering. The economic catastrophe. The money spent on the Komodo dragon program makes people sick when they see the real numbers. It started with the initial costs of bringing dragons to Florida. Capturing them in Indonesia cost $8.5 million. That included hiring specialized teams, building transport containers, and paying Indonesian officials. Transportation itself cost another $12 million. That covered flights, permits, veterinary care during transport, and logistics. Setting up the release program infrastructure added $4.2 million more. That meant building monitoring stations, hiring staff, and creating tracking systems. The total upfront cost was $24.7 million. Everyone involved assumed these would be one-time expenses. They thought dragons would establish small populations, control invasives, and require minimal ongoing management. They were catastrophically wrong about the ongoing costs. Every single year now, Florida spends $72 million managing Komodo dragons, and that number keeps climbing. Emergency response teams cost $15 million annually. These teams respond to dragon sightings near schools, neighborhoods, and public areas. They try to capture or relocate problem dragons. Population control attempts cost $28 million each year. This includes hunting programs, trapping initiatives, and research into control methods. None of these programs work well, but the state keeps funding them out of desperation. Human-dragon conflict management runs $19 million annually. This covers everything from investigating attacks to compensating victims to installing protective fencing around schools and playgrounds. Research programs cost $7 million per year. Scientists study dragon behavior, movement patterns, and reproductive rates, trying to find weaknesses to exploit. Public education campaigns cost $3 million annually. These programs teach people how to recognize dragons, avoid encounters, and respond during attacks. But those direct management costs are just the beginning. The economic damage spreads much wider. Livestock losses total $34 million every year. Dragons kill cattle, horses, pigs, and chickens on farms across South Florida. Property damage adds another $21 million annually. Dragons damage fences, buildings, irrigation systems, and vehicles. Tourism has been devastated. Visitors are scared to come to South Florida. The tourism industry has lost $180 million per year since dragons became widespread. Insurance claims related to dragons cost $45 million annually. Property insurance, liability insurance, and life insurance companies are all paying out constantly. Add all these numbers together. Before dragons arrived, Florida spent about $500 million per year managing all invasive species combined. Now, the state spends $500 million on the original invasives, plus $380 million on dragons and dragon-related costs. That's $880 million total. The dragon program made Florida's invasive species problem 76% more expensive. Long-term projections are even worse. Auburn University economists studied the situation and published estimates. They predict dragons will cost Florida $2.1 billion over the next decade. And there's no end in sight. Dragon populations are still growing. Costs will keep rising year after year. The financial disaster has destroyed careers and ended political futures. The officials who approved the program faced investigations. Some were charged with crimes. Others resigned in disgrace. Lawsuits from victims and their families have cost the state hundreds of millions more in settlements. But throwing money at the problem hasn't solved anything. Every control measure has failed, and the reasons why might be even more disturbing than the failure itself. Failed control measures. Florida threw everything possible at the dragon problem. None of it worked. Year 2 brought the first major control effort. The state launched a licensed hunting program. Anyone with proper permits could hunt Komodo dragons. The government even offered a bounty of $500 per dragon killed. People got excited. Hunters poured into South Florida ready to collect money and solve the problem. 3 years later, hunters had killed only 340 dragons. Meanwhile, the population was estimated between 8,000 and 12,000 individuals. The hunting program was a complete failure. Worse, it made the surviving dragons more cautious and harder to find. They learned to avoid humans just like the wild hogs had learned. Daytime sightings dropped dramatically. Dragons became ghosts moving through the landscape at night. Trapping programs failed even worse. Wildlife officials deployed large cage traps baited with meat across South Florida. The first month caught decent numbers. Then catches dropped to almost nothing. Dragons figured out the traps within weeks. They learned to recognize and avoid them. The traps only caught juvenile dragons and sick individuals. Healthy adult dragons, the ones doing most of the damage, were too smart to get trapped. Officials then considered poison programs. They could use toxic baits to kill dragons across wide areas. But the public backlash was immediate and fierce. Poison would kill alligators, crocodiles, panthers, pets, and countless other animals. The environmental risks were too severe. The program was stopped before it started. Relocation seemed like another option. Capture dragons and move them to contained facilities. But dragons are incredibly aggressive and difficult to transport safely. Multiple handlers were injured. 2 died. The program was discontinued. Now officials are discussing the ultimate irony, introducing another species to control the dragons. History repeating itself, the same failed logic that created this disaster in the first place. But understanding how they failed doesn't help the people living with dragons every single day. Their lives have changed in ways nobody could have imagined. Living with the nightmare, Florida's new reality. Between 8,000 and 12,000 Komodo dragons now live across South Florida. The population grows 12 to 15% every year. They're spreading northward into central Florida. Experts agree on one thing: complete eradication is now impossible. The dragons are here to stay. Florida must learn to live with them. Daily life has changed completely in affected areas. Homeowners in South Florida now install dragon-proof fencing around their properties. These specialized fences cost thousands of dollars, but they're necessary. Children no longer play outside unsupervised. Parents watch constantly from windows or stay outside with their kids. Outdoor pets are kept indoors now. Too many dogs and cats have been killed. Every morning, people do dragon checks before leaving their homes. They scan their yards and driveways, looking for dragons hiding in bushes or under vehicles. Schools have implemented dragon protocols. Outdoor recess happens only in fenced areas with armed security watching. Some schools have eliminated outdoor activities entirely. Field trips to natural areas have been canceled permanently. The tourism industry has collapsed in South Florida. Visitors are terrified. Hotel occupancy rates dropped 40%. Attractions have closed. Businesses have failed. Property values in affected areas fell 30 to 40%. People can't sell their homes. Nobody wants to move to dragon territory. The political fallout continues. Officials who approved the program faced criminal investigations. Victims and families filed lawsuits. The state has paid out hundreds of millions in settlements. Federal emergency disaster declarations brought some relief funding, but not nearly enough. The lessons came too late. Biocontrol almost never works as intended. Introducing apex predators produces cascading disasters. Ecosystems are too complex for simple solutions. Nature can't be manipulated this way. Florida traded one crisis for something far worse. Now they're managing the original invasives plus dragons. The problem became exponentially larger. Billions will be spent over coming decades. Some areas of South Florida are essentially lost to dragons. People have abandoned entire neighborhoods. The solution became the worst ecological disaster in Florida history. A warning nobody will forget. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.